I'm not entirely sure of how to start this conversation because I feel like it can go in so many different directions and can go down so many different rabbit holes because truth to so many different people mean different things. It's like for me, I'm a super black and white person, and I feel like there's truth and there's not truth. It's either something's true or it's not true. And that's just I don't know if it's because of growing up LDS or I'm just a black and white person or whatever. I don't know, but I know for me, it's like things are either true or they're not true. And recently, within the last, since I've been back on Instagram the last year and a half, I've found a hard time basically believing anything from anybody, like on social media, for example, of what is true and what isn't true, whether it's health stuff, whether it's political stuff, whether it's uh, Israel and Gaza or Ukraine and Russia, like whatever it is, like everyone has their own truths for everything out there. And so I've asked myself a lot of times, well, how can I discover what is actually true and what isn't true? Like, where is that? How do you really find that truth? And it's
all right. Well, why don't you start off first of all, Christian, by saying what you're, to you, truth. Define what it is to you, and then we'll just go around the room.
Truth to me is something that is actually factually real. So not something that's made up from opinions, which I feel like a lot of stuff on social media is. It's all people state their opinions of certain things as facts and truth, when in my mind, reality, it's not actually that. Truth is something that is factual and real.
So what does it take to prove that to you?
It's a great question. That's what I'm hoping this conversation goes good.
Well, like for you, you want it factually true. So does it have to, there have to be something that you trust that has deemed something true? Because there's a lot of things that science says is true that changes. And as we learn more, there's more information. So at what point do you sit there and say, yeah, I believe that that's my truth, and it's because of something or somebody that I trust? Or, you know what I'm trying to say? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I understand what you're saying, because if the source, it's like, where's the source coming from? Can you trust that source of where this truth is coming from? And if you can't, then you can't believe it. But a lot of these things that are like, for science for example, like the Big Bang Theory, like that is a theory. It is not fact or false, because there's no way to prove either way. It's just a theory, and that's why they keep exploring to see if they can see far enough back to where they can actually see the Big Bang. But like, well, what was I going to say? Like that source, like I'm not going to either believe, but it's just a belief. That's what I was going back. It's just a belief. So I might believe something's true, but that does not mean that it's actually true.
So how does it cross over from a belief to a knowledge? If we'll use that word as the definition, I guess.
No, I think that's a good word to use, knowledge. Well, what do you guys think?
What's that?
What are your guys' opinion on that? I like that question.
Well, I honestly think that it's a personal question. I think it's going to be different for everybody. Certain personalities are really easy to grab hold of something that they hear from just somebody on the street that told them a story, and they're like, oh yeah, that's true, that's cool, I believe that, and they internalize that, and for good or ill, it's what they make their truth. And so that's why I think it's really hard. I think there's kind of a scale of truth in all things. I think to some degree there's, even corrupt politicians, they mix in truth with lies to try and to try and get something to resonate with the constituency to help persuade you. And so to seek out the fine details, that's tough. And this is going to be a good conversation because of that, because I mean, trying to get to those finer details are really, it's an interesting quest.
Well, Jason, you said something interesting there. You said, "Oh, I believe that. That's true." So if you believe something, does that make it true? You say you heard somebody on the street or something. There's people who hear her story like, "Oh, that sounds good. I like that. I believe that it's true." Does for something to be true, does it have to cross over from belief to knowledge? That's what I'm getting at.
To me, yes, that is a requisite.
Okay.
Become truth, because truth is something that's real. I mean, because if you believe something, believing is not like hard evidence truth of something. It is a belief.
Belief could be true though.
What's hard evidence? What does that mean?
That's it's a good question. I mean, it seems like a lot of things for me, it's like it has to logically make sense. But for me, yeah, logic. Like logically, to me, it has to make sense. Like the flat Earth does not logically make sense to me, but it logically makes sense to a lot of people, and it's weird to see how many people it does make sense to. But logically, to me, that does not make sense at all. A flat Earth, it's mind-boggling to me. But there's a lot of people. So that's a perfect example of a conversation I have with my wife sometimes about, because she says, you have to discover your truth. And I'm like, well, truth is truth. Like if it's true, like it doesn't matter what your opinion about that thing is, it's still true. Like my desk is white. You could come and be like, well, my truth, your desk is yellow. I'm like, well, it doesn't matter what your truth is because the desk is actually white. So it doesn't, somebody else's belief of their truth about my desktop being yellow, it doesn't matter because it's not yellow. It is actually white. And that is truth. It is fact.
So I've got a question, and I hope that this doesn't spin out. It might be interesting. And JD, you might be pushing for something, and I'm sorry if this interrupts, but do you think your white, as you see it through your eyes, well, any color, your blue, do you think it matches the blue that I see? Like if we were to take our brains and put them side by side so we could actually see what each other sees, would my blue be the same as your blue, or would my green be the same as your blue?
So I get
and I'm opening that up for some analogies.
It's impossible to know, but
yeah. But that, I guess that's kind of the point, is like everybody's going to have a sphere that they, or a lens that they look through to evaluate their reality. And like you said, you're a very black and white person. There's a lot of gray area that has understanding that might be completely ignored because it doesn't fall into a truth, but that's who you are. It has to fall into a level of logic for you to get to this point of truth that you logically think that it needs to be there. But there might be some gray area that has, in the heavens and the cosmos, that this is actual truth sitting in this gray area. Oh man, my brain's going in circles as I try and parse that. But but does that make any sense? Like sure. I feel like there's what we accept as truth. There is a level of reality that each of us apply differently to that, to some degree or another. And I think that there should be more than that. And JD,
so I got a quick question, because you've used the word reality, which when I came with the title of this podcast, it's Unveiling Reality, the journey to discover truth. So reality and truth, like what is the difference there? Is there a difference?
JD, I'm waiting for some wise words. John, you've been quiet, buddy. Brother, it's time for you to step in this fight and bring some wisdom.
This is above my own intellect. I don't know what to say here.
The problem is I don't either, but the words keep spewing out of my mouth.
You know, in all reality, like this may never come to a conclusion, and this is going to be 4 completely separate, different opinions about what truth is and how people discover truth, and which is totally fine. It's like there might not be one, you know, there isn't going to be just one set way to do it. But like I said before, it doesn't matter what path you go. In my mind, there is only one truth for literally everything.
That's interesting. I've heard it said once that when your attitude is right, the facts don't count. What do you think about that?
I would, in certain aspects, I agree with that. Sure. Like if I'm talking to somebody, especially like on a political level, and they're and it comes into a heated conversation or whatever, I'm just be like, you're right. Like, it depends on, you know, I'm not going to waste my energy on something like that. So it's definitely situational whether I'm going to fight and say, no, that's not true, because it's probably the only thing I would ever fully like really fight against with truth is my, well, I don't even know if that's true, but I was going to say my like religious knowledge and beliefs.
I've heard it said that the truth stands on its own and needs no defense. What do you say to that? If you need to
I guess we can do the podcast, guys. I mean, way to go, GB.
No, I'm just asking questions.
Get it right to the end, why don't you?
We're talking about truth. What you guys familiar with Rene Descartes, the French philosopher who went down this rabbit hole? That was his whole thing. He got to a point where he's like, I have to know what's true, what I can prove beyond any kind of doubt. And he slowly started stripping away. You don't know anything about Rene Descartes? He's the one that came up with the phrase that totally kind of shot down, but he's the one who said, I think, therefore I am. You know, the really famous saying.
Mm-hmm.
Right, you heard that before?
I have heard
therefore I am. Because that's where he ended up. He started thinking the beliefs that he had, right, and tracing them back to a beginning. And almost every belief he had came from some offhand remark made by somebody or a parent or a teacher or something. And so he kept stripping away. And the only thing that he said that he knew for certain was mathematics. And I think, therefore I am. And that's so that's kind of, it sounds kind of like the direction you're wanting to go is that direction. So each person, in my mind, is something I've been doing for years. You have to take any belief or thing that you could say it's true. You say this is truth, but trace it back to where that came from, and then see if that source is actually one that's reliable. It's a very interesting process to go through.
That is.
So I think I want to jump in now. The source, that's something I think is kind of important, but I think with what we've discussed so far, that might be, you know, you might be able to tear that down, because like when I was in college, we couldn't just Google, you know, any search, you know, like for research. I couldn't just pull it off of any article off the internet. Like it had to be from what's the word they use? Reliable source, right? Like I couldn't just use a Google engine. I had to go to my school and dig through the library and find something that had credible research, right? Mm-hmm. So I think about that, like how does that apply in your search for truth? Like Christian, you said, you know, my truth, you got to find your own truth. Well, we see a lot of that today. You know, what's your gender? What's your, you know, what's your belief? You know, what, and whatever it is you want it to be, well, that's okay. Well, so without any credible research or backing, how is it? I mean, I can say anything's true, but I might just be making up my own life, and making up my own rules. And how does
So
that
I mean,
affect
that's a
everybody
good
else?
example, though. That's a good example of my point of what I've been talking about. And I know it, like, people who say a man can be a woman would instantly want to cancel me for this. But a man is a man. That is truth. Like, it doesn't matter what you do. You can't change your DNA and change yourself into a woman. You could do things to make yourself look like a woman, but DNA structural wise, you can't make yourself a woman. And so that is truth. Like, that's like, there's no black and white there. That's fact. So you can believe all you want and be like, this is my truth. I'm a woman. Be like, okay, well, in reality, the truth is you're still a man, even though you look like a woman and you did some stuff to yourself to make you a woman, but you're still not a woman.
So for me, I feel like truth has to have, like, there's some rules in it, right? Like, truth has to have, consistency. It has to be unchanging, which is interesting when you mentioned how there's some truths that we believed for centuries. The earth is flat. No, it's round. And now we're going back to maybe it's really flat, but there's some pretty hard evidence that says, no, it's round, right? Like you were saying, like, if it's proven, then, it's unchangeable. You can't change that. But I think we have to be able to allow for some authority in that, whether that comes from scientists who have studied and proven it, or maybe it comes from God and it's, his word. But there has to be somebody who can, because we don't have all, and I think that's where I feel like the danger of when we say you got to find your own truth. Well, I don't know everything, so how is it that I'm going to find my own truth if I don't have all the information to give me the right answers all the time?
Yeah, and I guess the reason why I don't like that phrase, find your own truth, is because of things like men saying that they're women. Like, no, you're not. That's finding your own truth. Like, that's what it like allows people to do. It allows people to come and make up these things that aren't real in reality. And it doesn't just affect one person. It affects, like it is now, like our entire nation. It is literally affecting everybody. And it's affecting the school systems. It's affecting the libraries. It's affecting everywhere you freaking go. There's, like, now I don't want to go off on a huge tangent on a political standing with that, but that's just a good example of, if you just let people just go claim their own truth, like, it causes problems.
Right. I was listening to the radio.
You have to force people to abide by a truth, but just saying, well, just go find your own truth, I think is super dangerous.
Dangerous. Absolutely. I was just going to say, listening to the radio a while ago, I think they actually had, their research had suggested that the percentage of people who are actually, transgender or in that community, like, represent such a small, like, very small portion of our population, and yet it is dominating the political conversation in our culture today. It's interesting to me how this thing that we don't really have any, like, scientific research or backing that is credible can have such a powerful influence, and now we're just saying, well, let's just say that if it's your truth, then it's acceptable.
Yeah, see, and I don't think that should just be accepted just because someone's, well, this is my truth, and then have it be accepted in society as a whole.
So then who determines what is truth?
So I'm not saying that, I'm just asking a question. Sparking thing, because I think, like, even with my education, right? Like I said, I had to go to this credible, like, where did the credit come from?
Mm-hmm. Who credited it?
Like, Like this person did a whole bunch of research. Was there multiple studies that came up and proved this, came to the same conclusion? You know, like a lot of that I think has started to slip away. You know, where people are like, well, I don't know if that's even true that now, because maybe they just drew up those conclusions. How do we trust them?
You know,
that's a good question.
I feel like I've gone down that rabbit hole a little bit too, like trying to figure out, prior to more of the spiritual stuff that we've dug into on a health journey, realizing that, okay, why are we just accepting the health systems method of doing anything when they're very profit driven and they have goals that might be different than my well-being, you know? And so it starts to create doubts. And why is that the authority? And you can start to go through and question everything about the schooling and university system at that point too. You know, are their goals on par for truth, or are they on par for manipulation and control? Are they on par for power? Do they have other reasons for uncovering some of the knowledge that they're espousing as truth? And some of that's hard. Have they done the research that they say they've done? I've heard a lot of research papers that say, yep, it's all good, but you don't get actually look at the data. And then when the vaccine stuff comes out and you're starting to look at it, you're starting to see, oh wow, this really wasn't a very good trial. That the data was completely skewed. And so all of the research papers that were written on this are fallible. And so
you're bringing up like perfect points of why this thought has come to my mind so often in the last several months, is because of stuff like that. I mean, like, and you were talking about food and the health industry and things like that. Do you know how big the sugar industry was in the United States in 2023? 13.2 billion. That is sugar processing. The market size of the sugar processing industry in the United States is measured at 13.2 billion in 2023. Sugar's terrible.
True?
What's that?
Is that number true?
I don't know. Maybe.
You start to question it all.
You do. And that's like, I literally question everything from everybody because of just how much I know. And social media is probably mainly to blame for it, just because there is so much back and forth about everything. Like, there was this one video clip. I didn't even think I talked about it once before, but it's like, this guy goes to eat like some meat, and it's like, don't eat meat. And then it shows a clip of someone saying, don't eat meat because of this. And he's like, oh, okay. And so he goes to start eating vegetables, and like, don't eat vegetables because of this. And he's like, oh crap. And then it does it with the fruit, and does it like, literally he had something for every single food group that he was trying to eat. And so it literally was nothing. He couldn't eat anything if you were to follow people's advice. So it's like that's there's so much information out there that is so contradicting on all fronts. How is anyone ever able oh my gosh, I can't talk. How is anybody ever supposed to know what is real or not with the way that society is?
It's impossible.
It's freaking impossible. It really is.
Well, here's the thing. This is the conclusion that I've personally come to, and I think everybody has to personally come to their own. But I think there's only one source of truth, and that's God directly. There is no other source of truth. There's things you can read, things you can listen to. There's external influences that you can pay attention to, but at the end of the day, all that does is bring something to your attention. But whether or not it's truth or the true learning has to come from God. That's my opinion on the matter. There's absolutely no way to be like, that is true unless it comes from God.
Yeah, I actually agree with that 100%.
And
well, I think a key point that you made, JD, too, is that has to come directly.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
we cannot come through somebody
else.
All
this, like, you know, even inside religion, right? Like my pastor, my bishop, the Pope, right? They're still human and they're still fallible. Like, I have the ability to receive revelation and communication from God directly. So that I think that's an important relationship to nurture and to chase after, because when things get confusing, especially in our, like in our society, like who can I turn to that's going to not steer me any other direction but the right way?
I like what you said there. You said that's an important thing to do, is learn how to receive that revelation or understand it. I think that is the important thing to learn. Not an important, the most important, the only thing that's really important.
So now when it comes to like, I'm going to tie both of these together, the food and stuff that Jason was just talking about, and then God, like discovering your own truth. Like, this is where I think it isn't dangerous, is when it pertains to you and only you and nobody else. So like, for example, the food thing, like me, if I eat beef is terrible for me because it jacks my stomach up. But it might be super, like for Heidi, she eats beef and she feels like she can go run a marathon. So her truth is beef's good for her. My truth is beef is bad for me, because but that isn't only my truth. Like, that's anybody else's truth about me, because it's actually real. Like, beef screws me up. Other meat I can eat just fine. So that discovering truth, I think, is good and needed. But that's where I think, like my example with all those different things about this is bad, that's bad, this bad, that's bad, going back and going to the one source of all truth is really the only way to know of how you could eat. If that's something that is super important to you and that you're really looking to do.
So Christian, on that one level that you're talking about there, now, is it beef itself, or is it the way beef is processed today? Like, if you had like some pure, free range, organic, never touched an antibiotic beef, can you eat that without having issues?
Well, that's all we eat anyways. So it's weird.
I'm just curious if there are other aspects, or if it's beef itself and something in the way it's made.
Yeah, no, and that's a good question. I mean, because it's weird, because, and it's actually not just beef, it's red meat, actually. Because I had someone give me some, when I first found out I had some beef issues, someone gave me some elk to eat, and we made like an elk roast, and that, like, oh my gosh, that destroyed me, absolutely destroyed me. So it's really just red meat I have a really hard time with. But sometimes but I have found, like, this is kind of a tangent, but I have found that ground beef I do much better with than like a steak. If I eat like a steak, like, it gets to where, like, it feels like knives are rolling around in my stomach. But ground beef, sometimes I don't have a problem with.
Well, I'm glad I'm not you. Anyway,
JD would survive if he all of a sudden couldn't eat meat.
I know. I hate that, but occasionally I'll take like little bites of my wife's steak or something just because it's so good.
All right, so I've had some thoughts while you guys were talking, and John, this is going back a little bit to what you started asking about. It reminds me a little bit of how people process things based on their level of consciousness. And so, first of all, does that make sense, John? Do you know what that means at all? Have you heard the term level of consciousness, or Christian, are you familiar with that at all?
Are you talking about the stuff that comes from the Power versus Force?
Yeah.
I haven't finished that book. I'm in another book right now, and I'll go back to that one later.
Okay. Just because. What's that?
I said he'll never make it back once you leave.
He is so hard to listen to. So hard. Okay, sorry, guys.
Dude, it's amazing how quickly you can get through a book, though, at like 3. I mean, this book that says it's going to be 15 hours. What's that?
I was saying, I've listened to 14 books in the last 2 weeks.
Holy cow.
Of his?
No, not just his, but just everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't saying that to brag. I was saying that because yes, you can get through books quickly if you want to.
Yeah. And anyway, and he just sounds normal when you have him up fast enough, but he talks about these levels of consciousness that everybody can work out of. And there's a lot of times when people are operating in a lower level of consciousness where a truth to them might be completely different than a truth to somebody that's operating at a higher level of consciousness. And I really don't know how to articulate that. JD, you might have to help out to articulate that more clearly, but I think that subjective truths start to play in with people that are operating, in various different levels of consciousness.
So I could see that.
That's what probably goes to the gender discussion that you were having before. And people operating at lower levels, their truths are subjective, and they accept that because they're just operating at a lower level of consciousness. Would be a take or a thought that I had on that.
And I think I actually totally understand what you're saying. So like, for example, shame, I think it was like 20 on that scale or something like that. Like someone who's operating at that level, the truth to them is that they are a piece of crap, period. No one can convince them otherwise. That is their truth. They're a piece of crap. But again, it goes back to my thing that I've said. It's like, it's not actually truth. It's a belief. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's where I guess that maybe I'm arguing semantics a lot in this, to where people use the word truth a lot. It's not actual truth. It's belief. People can believe whatever the crap they want, and their belief is their belief. That I'll never take away from anybody. But when you mix the word belief and truth, they're not the same. Belief is believing something to be true, but in reality, it might not be true. Truth is not the same as belief.
So is there an objective truth?
Is there an objective truth? I have no idea how to answer that.
Well, I think what you were saying before, I think there definitely is. And I think that only an inner knowing and intuition can help you recognize that truth. And that's just to your point earlier. I think that there has to be, and the thing that I've been learning that I've been finding interesting with Hawkins, and I don't necessarily understand the process, but a method to determine truth that comes completely from within yourself seems like a very powerful principle. And if we can attune to that and really have a good understanding of how to discern truth from that inner knowing, then yes, we can find some of those truths. And like I say, I think it's going to be subjective to some people because they're not going to have that understanding operating at lower levels of consciousness. Or not to suggest that I'm at a higher level, but as you work through that system to improve and to hopefully grow.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, because people who are operating at a lower level, you mean their truth, which is actually their belief, is not in reality factually true. But somebody who is operating at a higher level, the things that they do believe could actually or have a higher possibility of actually being truth.
Or else they wouldn't be operating at that level.
Right.
Because Christ is not going to espouse falsehoods. I mean, his level of consciousness is perfection. And
then how do you know what Christ said or did or does or says?
Is this channeling your Thomas Paine?
Yeah, not kind of, but no, just channeling my questions I've had ever since I've been alive that I can remember.
Yeah, no,
because we go off of the words written in the Bible, in the book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But who wrote them? When were they written?
Which were men writing.
Yeah, they were men. They've been passed down through centuries, in the hands of a lot of different people over the years. And so, yes, is what they wrote good? Mm-hmm. Sure, it's awesome. But is that what Jesus actually said? That's the question I'm asking you. And is it their interpretation of what he said, or what they heard somebody say that he said?
Or was it taken out of context?
What's that?
Or was it taken out of context?
Exactly. And so,
well, and I've heard lots of things that doubt that bring certain stories that Christ may or may not have participated in, not actual factual. But I think the thing that's most important is, how does that resonate when you have that intuition and that inner knowing that you can take a principle that's being taught there and you can apply and recognize the truth that's being taught. Does it matter if it comes from Christ or if it was inspired by Christ, or if it was inspired by God? Nonetheless, even if the story is not factually accurate, but can that still be a principle of truth that it's espousing that helps us? I've often heard that, like the lady taken in sin in the earliest writings of the translations, she's nowhere to be found. It doesn't happen until like 150 AD that, or AD or whatever it is now, that she makes it into official records. And how many times have you heard religious leaders quoting that? He who is without sin, let him cast the first stone. Do we even know that that's true? Do we even know that Christ did that? We don't. Is the principle still good? Yeah, I think so. It resonates with me and where I'm at. But you're right. I don't know as though, and does it matter?
Yeah, that's where I was going, Jason. Really what it comes down to, it's not about the words. It's about the feelings we get. It's about how we learn to communicate with God and understand him teaching us, whether it's Star Wars or the Bible or whatever, wherever you find this information. If it resonates, if God can use whatever catalyst it is that you're focusing on at the time to teach you something, does it matter? That's what I was getting at. Anyway, we went down the same road, just different paths to get there, I guess. That's what I was going towards. Because does it matter? What's that?
Same destination, different paths.
Yeah, there you go. Same destination, different paths. Ultimately, none of that matters. It doesn't matter what it is, because you cannot say that this is true by reading it, by listening to something. There's only one way to know if something's true. There's only one way to learn for real, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But and I like what you said, Jason. Does it feel good? Does it resonate? Because you can read things and they just don't resonate. You can hear somebody say something and they have all the facts to back it up. It's like, it just doesn't resonate. Now, is that your ego stepping in, being like, that doesn't agree with what I've built as my ego? Or is that God telling you something or not telling you something?
I think that's the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I very much recognize that my ego probably plays a role in what I feel is spiritual guidance. And so trying to parse that out, figure it out. I very much am of the belief that I'm not the type to just follow a religious leader. I would want to come to my own understanding before I just blindly went and did that. And is that contrary to, doing the right thing? Is that the right way to go? But I don't know. But for me, I feel like that's a way that God can reinforce in my mind that I'm on the right path. So if instead of just acting directly on the words, I can ponder them, or I can feel it in here to know that, yeah, that is truth. That is my truth. I accept that as truth, and then move forward with it.
So then let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about truth on a society level, kind of like we were talking about a little bit earlier, because I feel like that is something that is a big problem, to be frank. It's like, because about truth, it's like, well, if it's true, does it, like, I don't remember what you were saying, JD, but you're talking about, like, does it really matter? Like, if somebody has a truth or not, that's not true. It's like, does it really matter? We were talking about society. It's like, well, when do you actually do fight back when it's something that is affecting the society as a whole, and for a fact it's not true, but to these other people, these certain beliefs are resonating with them, but not with you, but it's affecting your entire life because it's taking over the political spectrum of things.
But why? I was to a point, and JD was probably is going to go in the same direction as this, because I feel like I get so fired up over politics, Christian. Just everything that you're saying, it's just give me a second, turn something on, and I can get right there with you. But then why? Why do I do that? Why do I need to be in that space? Why can't I go ahead and live my truth and push forward?
But I hear what you're saying. But that's kind of not what I'm really talking about.
Okay.
Like we live in Idaho, right? We live in kind of a political bubble here, when it doesn't affect us as much as other places. But like your girls, they go to public school, and there's places where public school, they have freaking drag queens doing story time. It's like their truth, that is okay. Our truth, that's not okay.
So do you fight against it? Is that what you're saying? So
what are you like? What, like, when it's affecting society as a whole, which this is, people, and this what's the word I'm looking for? This, I want to say argument, for lack of a better term, argument about what truth actually is affecting society as a whole. And I guess that's why I'm like, I'm so adamant about, not just, well, that's their truth, they can have their truth, whatever, I'm going to have mine. Now, like for me, all right, kids are all homeschooled. I don't have them in the school system for a freaking reason. But it's like there's a lot of areas where people might not have that option to be able to do that. And so when truth is affecting society, when untruth, but because it's resonating with somebody else, but for us, it's something different, but their truth is like wreaking havoc on society. So it's okay to just let people, no, they're living their truth, but yet they're bringing their truth into your kids' schools. They're bringing their truth into, trying to put it into your religions. You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't just affect just you.
So what are you suggesting? That you fight against it? That you raise up arms and voices?
Not necessarily raising up arms, but I mean, if it came to that, sure.
Just push against it with force.
But it's like, what, like, I guess I don't know how to do that. Maybe something like this, what we're doing now, is a way to do that. But there's so much freaking crap out there that people just sit back and don't fight against, because, well, I'm just living my own life. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, you're living your own life, but slowly and slowly, you're not going to be living your own life, because society is freaking being directed by a bunch of people who are directing truth in a way that is bullcrap.
Yeah, I jump back and forth. I mean, me before this, I would have been all over. You've got to be involved. You got to be helping make those decisions by making your voice heard and standing up for that truth. That's how I would have fought it, for all the reasons that you're saying. I think it becomes really hard though when you have social media and technology that says, okay, this is going on in a city in United States that's 2,000 miles away, 1,000 miles away from where I'm at right now. And you think that affects your circle, when really it doesn't affect your circle directly, but yet you allow that to affect and increase. It's like it's a global pain body, right? That continually grows and grows with the pain that everybody experiences and inflicts on everybody else with some of these thought processes. And it can be really difficult, and it has a big effect on you emotionally, I think, spiritually. And if you can just sit there and say, this is what's important to me, and make sure that you are living in that sphere and protecting that sphere, and as things threaten that, then you stand up for it. For you guys, schooling is a concern. You addressed that and you stood up for it, and now you fixed and made sure that you're happy with controlling that level of truth that's in your life, because you took action when it actually truly did start to affect you. But if you turn on the news and listen to other things that that frustrates you, is that anything that you can even touch? And is it worth growing that pain body to sit there and stew on it and become angry and upset about what's happening in the world when there's nothing you can do about something that's going on in Georgia? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense.
And I really like the quote by Buckminster Fuller, where he said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." Nothing resonates with me more than that.
JD, where do you come up with this stuff, man? That reminds me of a quote.
I'm reading it too.
I was like, how did he look that up and have that ready for us? I didn't see him doing anything. He was just like, here it is. I got it. It's like he's got.
Doesn't that make a lot of sense though? Because
it does.
Wherever you put this is one thing that I believe is wherever you put your energy, whether it's positive or negative, you are giving that to whatever it is you're focusing on. So if you want to fight against somebody, you're going to be met. You have to use force, and you're going to be met with counter force. The idea is to figure out a way to raise your power enough to where that whatever that counter force is just becomes obsolete. Whatever that looks like to you, whatever that means. Like in your situation, Christian, you take your kids out of school. So yeah, you could still go to meetings and protest it and go against those things, but then you're using your energy and putting it into that. You're actually feeding it by fighting against it. And that's my opinion on the subject, because like Nikola Tesla said, you want to know the secrets of the universe? Think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. If you want to know the secrets to overcoming mistruth, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. You want to know the secrets of whatever success, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. If you can do that, get that energy up, that frequency up, that vibration up, like what Jason was talking about earlier, it brings everything with it.
I love how we get in these conversations and we'll go down these rabbit holes, and then JD comes on and he says like 3 words, and we all just shut up because we don't know how to respond to it.
Well, they're not. That's the thing, man. We get so caught up in this external world. The external world is results. All it is results. We keep fighting against results. The fruit. If you want to change something, change the roots, and the roots are all far beyond what you can see, because what you can see has already been created. We have the power to create in this world through imagination and through faith and through these things that are unseen. They're so much more powerful than what are seen. If we sit there fighting in the seen world, the already manifest world, the already created world, we're just spinning our wheels. We're wasting our energy. That may be true, may not. I don't know. You have to figure it out for yourself. I've come to believe that to be true.
Well, I'll take your analogy a little bit further. Some of the fruits of other people's trees of existing systems have seeds that you can go and you can plant and you can grow it anew, instead of taking something that's out there already, taking a piece of that, the truth that you think is good, and you start anew with something better, because I think there's a lot of times when people can come together in disagreement and you can rise above that to create something better. If it's done in a spirit of, not in a spirit of discord, that you truly can take what JD's saying and bring it to a new level of awareness, consciousness, bring it to fruition.
Yeah. Like Mother Teresa, she said, I was once asked why I don't participate in anti-war demonstrations. I said that I will never do that. But as soon as you have a pro-peace rally, I'll be there. You see the difference? One's anti-war. It's fighting against something. And the other one is, it's kind of the same thing, but it's what are you focusing on? She said, pro-peace rally, I'm there. And you can't dispute that Mother Teresa did a lot of good, right? She must know a little bit of what she's talking about.
Totally.
So
no, that's good. All awesome points. I really like all that.
What level of consciousness does Mother Teresa resonate at?
She was in the mid 700s.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Like up there with Gandhi.
Yeah, so I guess I want to go back to Christian's question though, with like, how do you fight? Like, is deciding to pull your kids out of this public system and home educate, is that movement of positive? I'm fighting against the system by creating a new system that propels my own truth, that protects my family in the way that I feel that they need to be, and I am able to, I guess, control. I don't know if that's the right word, but control the truth.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, at that, like, in social media, there's a ton of people who are doing what we're doing because they're just sick of the school systems, sick of whatever. And so, like, to JD's point, instead of going and fighting against the school, I wasn't thinking of it like this, but instead of fighting against the school, we're creating our own methodologies, whatever, and pull their kids out and are doing our own thing. So there's way more people.
Pro-war rally.
What's that?
It's your own pro-war rally.
Yeah, it is. Yep. So it supports our truth for what we believe in. It supports our belief, not truth. I really hate that word unless it's actual truth.
Isn't that what this whole thing's about?
It is, but when the word truth is being used for belief, it drives me nuts.
We see that a lot everywhere. Words being used for other words. But
yeah, and
what's that?
I always want to be corrected because I don't like using words wrong. Because I feel like words have power. And so if you're using words in a wrong way, it's going to let off the wrong frequency and vibration and things like that, like what you were talking about. So that's why I it's always been a tick of mine that if I know a word is being used wrong, I will usually try to correct it, and it drives my wife nuts.
I've heard it said that words don't convey meaning; they simply call it forth, and I like that a lot.
What is that? Well, how would that actually?
So
a little bit.
Like when I say a word, I'm saying a word out of my mouth, and it's founded in something. Like just say I say the word green, right? In my mind, I'm thinking about a tree leaf, but I say the word green, and so it doesn't go from my mind and into your mind as a tree leaf. I say green, and you may be thinking about the shirt you're wearing or a crayon. You know what I'm saying? So nothing is transferred from me to you. I am creating something that is drawing a meaning out from within you. So words do not convey meaning; they simply draw it forth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
what you're saying is basically somebody who is using the word truth, it doesn't matter because their meaning isn't actually
exactly. When you say people use the word truth meaning a belief or something they heard one time, they may not be using it. When you say truth, they may be thinking something completely different and vice versa. So it's a miracle that we can even communicate using words. It really is.
Well, and you really get a good grasp of that when you try and create a prompt for AI to do something. Does that make sense? Because you realize how inadequate your communication can be when you don't have. I think humans have a spiritual gift, or our brains have a sense of being able to kind of transcend above just the words to be able to get the meaning and the feeling of what somebody's saying. Just
there's a feeling that's communicated along with the words that can help to translate that between two individuals. Yeah, I see that.
That's the vibration. That's the aura of what's being said that comes across.
Yeah. And the way things are said makes a big difference,
Yeah.
That's one of my, I think, favorite little phrases is what you say and how you say it matters.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Communication. I mean, I think that's part of the problem with texting, today. Like you could send a text message to somebody in a joking way, but depending on their mood on the other side, they read that text and they go, well, that was rude, and then they don't talk to you for the rest of the week. And you're like, why didn't you respond to my text message?
Because you're being a jerk, right?
Right. Yeah.
No, I get that all the time.
Actually knew the personality behind it, then they might have been like, oh, that's just John. That's how he jokes, But it takes somebody who knows me intimately to understand that. If it's somebody that only texts once a month, like they're not going to get that. So
that's what emojis are for.
Yeah, exactly what emojis are for. Mm-hmm.
It's funny because I was listening to Matt Walsh today on the radio, and he put a plug in on like how much he hates emojis because that's all the current generation knows how to communicate with, and he was arguing how that has depleted our vocabulary in society to the point that like we don't know how to communicate in any other way but through emoji, and so our vocabulary
maybe will become more efficient.
20 years ago, we had a very broad vocabulary in our society, and now it's just kind of whittled down to IDK.
So I'm going to stop the podcast because I actually think we had a good stopping point a little bit ago. And so I'm going to stop it now, but we can keep chatting about whatever.